Hi, my name is Crystal Tinsley, and I am the psychotherapist and practice owner for Intentional Living LLC. Intentional Living is actually a remote only psychotherapy agency. We currently see individuals, couples, and families. We actually work through things such as depression, anxiety, post traumatic stress disorder, postpartum, transition, and just overall stress. Sometimes you just actually need a place to dump. And so if you're looking for that type of therapy, or if you're looking for just someone to talk to, check out Intentional Living LLC. So actually the name Intentional Living started back in 2017. I actually heard a sermon from my pastor and he talked about living intentionally. And his sermon was called actually Intentional Living. And he talked about how a lot of us, we want to live this intentional life and we just don't know how to. We want to live so intentionally, but we want to live intentionally based on something we've seen on TV or based on someone we know and based on something we heard, such as a different buzzword. But intentional living is truly, how can I live this life that I truly want to live versus this imposter life that I'm living for someone else. And so when I thought about this sermon, I said, wow, that would be an awesome name for a practice. And that's where it came about. Truly an approach to mental health care, everyone comes in with their own struggles, with their own ideas of what they want to work on. And so I like the client to really, first come in with the actual thing that they want to work on. And from there, we decide based on their treatment plan goals. If I come in and I say, I want to work on being assertive and being able to tell people when I'm not comfortable and being able to tell someone no, the way they work through their issues is going to be completely different from someone who wants to work through a trauma-related incident. Maybe they can't go to the grocery store anymore because of a trauma they saw on television or a trauma that they actually witnessed themselves. And so my approach is really centered focus and client focus. I want to be sure that I'm meeting their needs and not just something that I've learned or something that I know that can work, but something that actually will work for that particular client. One of the biggest misconceptions in mental health care is that it is countered with medication. I'm actually not a huge advocate for medication unless the client is actually in therapy. I think medication does not work as best as it can if you're not actually processing those feelings and actually talking about why in the world are you taking the medication in the first place. So a huge misconception is that this person is going to say that I'm crazy or say that I need to take a medication that I truly don't want to take. Another misconception is that it just won't work. A lot of people think that I'm just dumping my money into this agency and it's not going to work. But the true idea that I want someone to take away from this is that therapy is a process and it takes time. So if you're coming in and you're thinking, oh, I want this fix my life experience and I want something to be really quick, that is not going to be the case in therapy. A lot of people don't see transition until after about the 12th session. So a huge misconception is that I'm going to be wham bam, I'm going to be in and out and it's going to work out for me. Or they think that this person is going to unidentify me and try to prescribe medication. Individually, individual can come into the agency and say, hey, I want to work on this incident that happened, let's say on my college campus. We go full throttle individually working on that particular issue. We find out what the index trauma is, and then we find out what stuck points go along with that trauma. A person may come in with something that is less severe, such as I just moved into the DMV area and I really want to, kind of talk about this transition. And so individually we'll work together, building some goals. Of course, in the beginning, they have a treatment plan and we follow through with the treatment plan until they are finished their process with me. While they're working with me, if something else comes up, we are still working towards the overall goal. But individually doesn't mean they can't come back later for couples or they can't come back later for booster sessions. Some people do several sessions with me and then they say, yeah, I think I'm good. And then they come back. And when they come back, it's a completely different issue. So my couples come in and we typically work on things related to Gottman therapy. Gottman is a type of therapy that is only for couples counseling. Couples are coming in and they are directed with various homework assignments, and each session has a plan. Regardless of what they're coming into, if they're coming in to therapy for issues related to infidelity or a loss of pregnancy and they want to kind of process that as a couple, we are still using Gottman therapy because Gottman is truly in place to help the couple transition their communication so that when I'm not in the room, they are properly able to communicate and express their needs to one another. Family therapy is actually one of my favorites. So I typically see each member of the family once individually, giving them an opportunity to give any confidential information that they want to process first before we join as a family. Typically, each of them have a different idea of what they are gaining and what they want to gain in therapy. And so as we develop an individual goal, we also then come together as a family and we develop our family goal. And at that time, I usually make an assessment and I'll say if the individual also should be in individual counseling as well as family counseling, or if the family comes in and a couple needs to be seen and then the children individually, I typically will make that assessment at the first session with each individual family member. So once a client has come in and they've declared that they want to start working intentionally, one of the biggest things they have to do is the documentation. That's also something that kind of can steer someone away from doing their therapy. So in the documentation, there are various assessments such as a PHQ-9, a GAF, which is the GAF score. And you've all seen these scores before because you've gone to the doctors once or twice before in your life. And so these are assessments that are actually looking at things like depression and anxiety. And so those numbers help me kind of understand where the client is, and maybe they're not dealing with depression, and maybe they have a high score for depression and they are not actually sharing that in the session, or they're not sharing that in their initial contact with me. And so the scores that I have actually help me throughout our process, and they are scored typically every 6 months or actually every 3 months for some clients, depending on what they're working. To prepare for a session, a client should actually just bring themselves to the session. Don't come to the session thinking, how is this person going to view me? How does the world view me? I want you to bring yourself. So if that means you are in your house, in your PJs, or in between your work day, and that looks like your first session with me, just come with your whole heart and your mind open and ready to work. This is definitely a space that says, I'm ready to do this type of work. This is not easy. This is not something that you would say, I just want to see how this works and I'll do it casually. I want you to come into intentional living being fully prepared that I want to change my life. I want my life to look different than the way it looked when I first started, or before I started, or before I even signed up or thought about therapy. At the end of each session, you probably are going to be exposed to a little bit of homework, right? I know people do not want to do any homework. They don't typically want to do any documentation after the session, but the homework doesn't always look like documentation. If you're coming in and you have something such as like social anxiety disorder, you are most likely going to be asked to go in a space that you're uncomfortable. Yes, you are going to be uncomfortable if you're going to be working on various things in therapy. So you are going to be called out to do a little bit of homework. And of course, after the client has built some type of rapport is when you'll have those type of assignments. So no, you won't just be thrown in the fire, and no, you won't do this by yourself. But you will have work outside of session, because the real kicker is you see me probably for 2 hours a month. And outside of that, you still have to actively be intentional and working on these actual goals. You'll have a copy of your treatment plan, and you'll have a plan to actually follow along with in between our sessions. Something I want clients to know is that in this space of being vulnerable, you're coming in and unfolding all of your life story and unfolding some pretty vulnerable areas of your life. One thing I want you to know is that it is okay to tell me that something is not working out if you are working with me individually and as a couple or even in a group. It's okay to tell the therapist that I need more. It's okay to tell the therapist that I no longer want to talk about my dad and I actually want to focus now on my career goals. It's okay to transition. It's okay to change your treatment plan if that's something you want to do. Do not be afraid of changing things, and don't be afraid of speaking up, because this is not a place that we want you to be more uncomfortable than you were before you started therapy. I have clients all the time that might say, I think I'm done working on this area and I want to move forward and work on a different area, and that's perfectly fine. Some trends that I actually see in therapy are a lot of people are coming in and they are wanting to focus on things that they are more relative to things that they see on television than their actual life. They're also not being as honest as they can be. And then 6 months down the road, they may say, hey, you know what? I've been lying this whole time. I really want to work on this. And I say that because we are not showing up as our whole self. We are coming into therapy because it's something that a friend has told us we should do, or a loved one has said you would benefit from this, but we really don't know how to do so. We don't know how to come in and just dump, even though we dump every day on our loved ones and in our friends when we want to vent about different things. I want you to use this space as that space as well. So a huge trend, again, would be coming into this space and not bringing yourself. Another thing I would say, a lot of people come into therapy and they're only doing it because they want quick resolution. And again, therapy is one of those things you actually have to be actively working on, because it's not a quick resolution. You know, prior to the pandemic, mental health care was not something that is talked about as much as it is talked about now. There's a huge stigma on mental health care. And I actually see it evolving because we are now able to do life without having to get to an office or drive an hour to your appointment, then an hour back, and then after you process some pretty deep things, getting in the car. Now you have an option of doing things remotely. You also have an option of being able to email your providers, email your therapists, getting additional resources, getting your homework via email, or getting your homework via your client portal. I have a client portal where clients can log in at any point. They can see their treatment plan. They can see the notes that I've put in if I say I want them to work on something additional, they can see that guidance. They also have a lot of access to my calendar. And so if you saw me on Wednesday and you're like, yeah, you know what, I kind of want to pick up something sooner than 2 weeks, you have the option of going on the scheduler and actually looking for an appointment that works best for you. In the past, the therapist would typically write a time down or have someone at the front desk that would check them in and out. And now clients actually have the capacity to do a lot of these things on their own. Again, client-focused, client-centered approaches that allows you to feel like you have some autonomy in the work that you're doing with the provider. So it's not just the provider guiding you and teaching you and providing these resources. You're also putting in a lot of work.